All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with some Niner news coming out on Brock Purdy. Now, it looks like Brock Purdy is going to have his surgery postponed due to ongoing inflammation in his elbow. He's going to reconvene with Dr. Keith Meister in early March. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network provided the update on Purdy. Now, Purdy was slated to have the surgery this week. In fact, the surgery originally was scheduled for tomorrow. He visited Dr. Keith Meister, who recommended that Brock postpone the surgery because he's having some ongoing inflammation in the elbow. So they plan to re-meet up in early March, and Pelissaro does add that all signs continue to point to a UCL repair that would have Purdy ready for the 2023 season. So interesting, it sounds like it's a bad UCL tear and that it's still too inflamed to perform surgery, 3-4 weeks after the injury. So it sounds like they're going to postpone it to be more like 4.5 to 5 weeks after the injury. The severity of the injury, makes sense because, Purdy's received a bunch of consultations, to try to make a decision between a UCL repair and a Tommy John surgery, which is an elbow reconstruction. So it's an interesting report. The original surgery date was February 22nd, and they were thinking that, maybe Purdy could be ready for week 1. So just looking at week 1's date, that's 6 months and 19 days after tomorrow's date, the 22nd of February. So that's 6 months and 19 days. If you postpone the surgery to early March, and so that means he has the surgery, 4.5 to 5 weeks after the injury, and still there's a 6-month timeline from the date of the surgery to week 1. You still have an ability to be there for week 1. But I think what's really the story here is, one, it sounds like we're getting some indications that it's not going to be a Tommy John surgery, which would be a 9-month surgery or 9-month rehab, that it's more likely to be a lesser surgery which means a 6-month surgery or 6-month rehab. So it sounds like Brock might be ready for week 1, but this idea that he's going to be ready for training camp, I don't think that's going to be possible. And he may not even be ready to play in the preseason. So the 49ers may have to go into this next season, at least the regular season, week 1, with Trey Lance as the starter, or somebody else besides Brock Purdy. And I think this kind of highlights kind of my thoughts on the quarterback position. I was looking at the free agent market up and down and looking at the options. One, I don't know that the 49ers want to spend any kind of significant cap room, this year on a quarterback. You've got Brock on a rookie deal. You got Trey still on a rookie deal. So I think that rules out, Jarrett Stidham or, Andy Dalton. I've heard names like Easton Stick, who played with Trey at North Dakota State, CJ Beathard, who obviously Niner fans know well as a former Niner 3rd-round draft choice, who, is a tough guy backup, but not all that talented. Then there's Jarrett Stidham, who, is a young player who I thought looked really good against the 49ers in the game, the Raider-Niner game. But then the next week against Kansas City's defense, he didn't look nearly as good. And Stidham's been in the league. He's been with the Patriots, been with the Raiders. He's far from a sure thing. So looking closer at their quarterback situation, I don't know that the solution on the third guy is going to come in the free agent market. In fact, I'm starting to think that it's very unlikely that third quarterback's in the free agent market. But I do think that it's really imperative for the 49ers, who had their season end because they ran out of quarterbacks this year, to treat that third quarterback. They don't need a backup quarterback. They don't need a partial backup quarterback. They need a starting caliber quarterback with that third quarterback. Now, some people would say, oh my God, Krug, that's overkill. Brock's a starter, Trey's a starter. The last thing you need is to throw another starter in the mix. No. The last thing you need is to have next season end because you don't have a good enough quarterback to win games at the end of the year because your quarterbacks have gotten hurt. 41 different quarterbacks took 20% of the snaps this year for their respective teams. 16 different teams in the NFL used 3 quarterbacks this year. The defenses are faster and more physical than ever before. Their quarterbacks are being blitzed by smaller, more athletic players. And those players are getting home and they're hitting these quarterbacks and they're causing injuries. So if you said to me, you know what, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have 1 year to get it done. Well, I think we would all agree that's not the case, that Jed York likes both. And neither of these guys are in their walk year, and they're not really in a Super Bowl or bust situation. But I think if you really look at what it takes to win the Super Bowl, I think you got to be all in. I think you've got to be absolutely all in. That's what the Rams were 2 years ago. I think that's what the Chiefs and Eagles were this last year. And that's what the Niners need to do going into next year. So what does that exactly mean? Well, there's other needs, right? They need a right tackle if McGlinchey leaves. And looking at the rankings, McGlinchey's thought to be a top 10 or maybe even top 5 offensive tackle in free agency. So he's going to get huge money. The Bears have $94 million of cap room, the most in the league, and they've got a need at tackle. So I think he winds up in Chicago, and I don't think there's anything the 49ers can do about it. So right tackle is a need. Javon Kinlaw played horribly at the end of the year. They have to find a complement to Eric Armstead inside, at least somebody who can be dependable against the inside run like DJ Jones was a couple years ago. They don't have that in Kinlaw, so they have other needs. Jimmy Ward's a free agent. Got to bring him back. Emmanuel Mosley's a free agent. Want to have him back as well. So they've got a number of needs. But if you said to me, what is the number one thing that could take the 49ers out of the Super Bowl running next year? It's quarterback. The 49ers are stacked. This is one of the best rosters in all of pro football. They're loaded. And if you look at the NFC's thin. I mean, the Eagles are about to sign Jalen Hurts to a $50 million a year contract. The Eagles have 12 free agents. 10 of them are starters. Their roster next year almost guarantees to be not as good as it was this year because of their cap situation, the quarterback expense going way, way up, and they're going to have to say goodbye to a lot of their premier guys and replace those guys in the draft. Outside of the Eagles, there's not a team in the NFC that even worries me in the slightest. I haven't seen the NFC this thin in a long, long time. The 49ers are going to spend 4 of the next 5 seasons or 5 of the next 6 seasons. They're going to be in that NFC championship game every year. The only thing that could possibly derail the 49ers is if somehow, some way, they have more injuries at the quarterback spot. Now, I think Brock Purdy is a franchise quarterback, but who knows? You know, we're talking about the timeline on his return. We don't know how he's going to return. You know, it's the biggest news is not how long it's going to take for him to return. It's going to be in July when we see what he looks like after he returns. He didn't have a lot of fastball to lose. So if this elbow injury somehow takes, some miles per hour off of his fastball, he's maybe not going to be a franchise quarterback. He may not be the same guy. He may be diminished. So that's possible. Trey Lance had a very serious ankle injury. He's supposedly rehabbed and back. We don't know. Has he lost speed? I'm just saying both these guys are injured, and they weren't just nothing injuries. They were pretty significant injuries. So you're obviously bringing them back. And the good news is you got the cheapest quarterback room in the league. But the downside is you may not have your guy. Brock may have lost something off the fastball, and he's no longer a franchise quarterback. Trey may have a lot of nice traits, but he might be 2 years away from becoming a franchise quarterback. You can't waste next year on quarterback problems again. You can't let next year go by because you don't have a quarterback. So I think the Niners have to take a real serious look and have a desperation about them when they go about their quarterback search. That third guy shouldn't be a backup. That third guy's got to be a potential starter. And it can't be a big time guy who's making money. It's got to be a cheap quarterback that allows you to spend your cap on the other needs that you have, but also is good enough that you believe to maybe start. and maybe lead you to a playoff win or two, or possibly, God forbid, if you don't have the other two guys, maybe is a guy you have to win a championship with. So who would you be interested in? All right. Well, what's the deal around the NFL? Are the Bears going to take the quarterback? Are they going Bryce Young or the kid out of Kentucky, Will Levis? Are they going quarterback at the top of the draft? Are they going to trade Justin Fields? If they are, I think I'm interested in talking to them. Are the Atlanta Falcons going with Desmond Ridder and not with Marcus Mariota? Mariota looked pretty damn good against the Niners last year. If I need to refresh you guys, he completed 93% of his passes and carried out the RPO runs to perfection. In some ways, Mariota's exactly, at least in that game against the Niners last year, is exactly what the Niners want to get out of Trey Lance. So if the Falcons make him available, I'm absolutely interested in Marcus Mariota. If the Jets are going with Aaron Rodgers and they're going to move off of Zach Wilson, I'm interested in Zach Wilson. I think he's got starter potential despite the nightmarish rookie year. If the Texans are going with a rookie draft choice in the draft, maybe they're going to wind up with Bryce Young. Maybe they're going to wind up with CJ Stroud. Is Davis Mills available? I'm interested in Davis Mills. Is Mitchell Trubisky available? Might have some interest there. And then in the draft, I like Jake Haener. I like Tanner McKee. I like Clayton Tune. These guys are probably all going to be day 3 quarterbacks. So to me, I think what's really clear to me is that while we really like the potential of Trey and Brock, because of somewhat serious injuries, there's no guarantee that either of those guys is going to be able to do it this year. You can't waste any more time. As far as, you can't go for a backup. You can't go for Chase Daniel. You can't go for CJ Beathard. That third guy might have to play. He might have to win you playoff games. I mean, if this year was any indication, it's likely that that guy will have to play. So what are you looking for? I think you're looking for a starting quarterback who you believe can play, but doesn't cost a lot of money. And so that means trading for a youngster like I just outlined, or going into the draft probably on day 2 or day 3, since they don't have a day 1 pick, and looking in the draft. To me, that's the route to go. Now, as far as this news on Purdy, the fact that Pelissaro is reporting that all signs continue to point to a UCL repair and not the reconstruction, that's good news. But we still don't know if he'll come back diminished at all. It just sounds like he'll be ready for the start of the year. But we don't know if it's going to be the Brock that we saw this year, or if it's going to be somehow a Brock that has a little bit less of a fastball. And if he has a little bit less of a fastball, maybe he can't throw the deep out. Maybe he can't make all the requisite throws in the NFL. So that's something to be concerned with. And then Trey, Trey's got major talent. He's saying all the right things. He's going to get a great opportunity on the field this summer to show his development and show that he's the starting quarterback. But what if he just shows that he is a guy that has traits, that's going to play really inconsistent football, and he needs 2 years to develop? And it would be totally within the realm of possibility that that's the case. Well, that to me would not be a shock. And so I think the 49ers ought to prepare themselves for a situation where Brock's back, but maybe not the same. Trey's back, but maybe not quite ready. And that third quarterback can't just be a backup. It's got to be a starter. It's got to be a starter. I'd probably vote for Marcus Mariota, a trade for Mariota, but those other guys I mentioned, I'd have a ton of interest in as well. I would treat this situation like you don't have a franchise quarterback until you do, until you absolutely know you do. If there's one thing that will keep the 49ers from winning that 6th Lombardi, it's the quarterback. If there's one thing that's going to lead to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch not being with the 49ers, it's more seasons lost due to the quarterback position. So they got to get this right. They don't want to bring in a veteran because I don't know that they can attract a veteran. I don't know a good veteran is going to want to come here. One, I don't think they've got the cap to spend. Niners right now have the 16th most cap room in the NFL. They've got $8 million under the cap going into the combine, which is coming up in a few weeks. So they don't have a ton of money to spend on a free agent. And I don't know that I would recommend it. And I don't know that you could attract one. Why, if I'm Andy Dalton, why am I coming here? So I can sit behind Brock and Trey and just hope they both get hurt so I can get on the field. So I don't know that veteran quarterbacks are even going to want their money. And I don't know that that's the best place for them to spend their money. I think what they do have to think about, though, is the third quarterback can't be a third quarterback. The third quarterback's got to be somebody that they believe is a starting caliber quarterback, but just has a third quarterback price tag because they're either young, in their career, or they're literally rookies. So that's the way I see the latest news on Brock Purdy. I think it's going to be a really interesting offseason for the 49ers, because it's not just about the news of what the prognosis is on the surgery. It's going to be, what does Brock's rehab actually look like? Are there setbacks? Is he ready to play football right away in September? And just because he's ready to come back in September doesn't mean that he's going to be able to handle the load on which a starting quarterback has for, a 17-week regular season and, a month-long run in the playoffs. So if I'm the Niners, they, obviously you got to bolster the line. You got to bolster the secondary. There's, got to look for an offensive tackle. If McGlinchey bails, you're going to have to look for a defensive tackle who's stout against the run. All these things are vital, but nothing is more important than figuring out who that third quarterback is. And I'll say it one more time. They need a third quarterback who's young, who they believe in, but is also cheap. And some people would say, well, how's Trey going to respond? How's Brock going to respond if you bring in Zach Wilson, if you bring in Davis Mills, if you bring in Marcus Mariota? I don't care. And the Niners shouldn't either. It's not about feelings. There's competition on every other spot on this football team. There can be competition at the quarterback spot. If there's one thing that will prevent the Niners from winning the Super Bowl in the next, 4 or 5 years, it's the quarterback spot. They got a loaded roster in a very thin conference, and the Eagles are going to have cap problems in the years ahead. So figuring out the quarterback position is absolutely the biggest priority of the offseason. And what they need is a young, cheap quarterback that they believe they can win games with. We'll see who that is. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you catch the Krug Show on YouTube, brought to you by Pig in a Pickle.